Hey, this is Aaron Rabinowitz for CreativeCow.net. Bad news, folks. After Effects has a dirty little secret. It doesn't scale things correctly. Or rather, it scales them a little too correctly. And by that I mean that After Effects likes to scale layers in a linear fashion, and not exponentially, which is more visually correct for a camera zoom. Consequently, scaling can start to look really funky depending on what you're doing. What's this madman talking about, you say? After Effects scales things fine. I know because I do it every day and I've never seen a problem. Well, if you're like most After Effects animators, you probably never noticed a problem unless you've tried animating the scale of a layer to go from 100% to the high thousands or vice versa. When you're working at low numbers like the low hundreds down to 0, you probably won't see anything. But the moment you start working with higher values, you'll be saying things like, "Whoa, strange things are afoot at the Circle K," or something less obscure to denote your utter astonishment at how odd the scale is behaving. First, let's take a look at the problem in a very controlled experiment. Here I have some text that I'm scaling up from 0% to 100% over 11 frames. So at frame 0, the scale is set to 0%, and at frame 10, the scale is set to 100%. If you move along in time frame by frame, as you can see in the scale property, After Effects is scaling up by 10% on every frame. So at frame 5, for example, it's scaled to 50%, and at frame 6, it's scaled to 60%. What's going on here is that After Effects has done the math to come up with a logical formula for scaling that goes something like this. At frame 0, the scale value is 0%. After the first frame, there are 10 more frames of animation in which scale has to go from a value of 0% to 100%. So, 100% divided by 10 frames equals 10% scaling at every frame. Things look alright in this sort of small scale animation, and that may seem well and good, but as soon as you try to scale from, I don't know, say 10,000 down to 100%, then you're in for a nasty surprise. As you can see from the example, things look a bit weird. The text seems to stay large until the last moment when it kinda smacks down and settles onto the white background. Oh, now the crazy man behind the microphone is starting to make some sense. The reason this is happening is because of math. Evil, evil math. You see, at frame 1, our text is set to a scale of 10,000%, and then at frame 2, it's set to 9,700. And as we move down in time, we can see that After Effects is scaling things down by an even 300% at every frame. Admittedly, you're not going to see clean numbers like this regularly. You'll probably see fractional percents, but I've set this project up to illustrate my point with nice round numbers so it would make a little more sense. Anyway, the real problem is that the difference between, say, 10,000 and 9,700 isn't that big a deal visually, but the difference between, say, 400% and 100% is quite large. So while mathematically you have something that makes sense, visually you don't. Right now, After Effects is using a very linear method of scaling, which is not correct for an optical zoom. If you take a look in the graph editor, you can see that the scaling is very linear, shown here as a diagonal line. We need to correct this because when zooming optically with a lens, the rate of change of scaling increases as you zoom in or decreases as you zoom out. Fortunately, the folks at Adobe haven't left us without a solution, and that solution is called exponential scale. Let's get out of the graph editor here and get this working properly. Okay, select the first and last scaling keyframes, which happens to be our only two keyframes here. Next, choose Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Exponential Scale. As you can see, After Effects has created a keyframe at every frame. If we look in the graph editor, we'll see that the exponential scale has converted the scaling curve from a linear shaped curve to an exponential curve, which basically means that the values are changing in increasing or decreasing increments instead of at the same increment at every frame. Two important notes. You don't need to select the first and last scaling keyframes in your timeline, just the two keyframes between which you'd like to scale exponentially. So that means you can have some of your scale be linear and some of it be exponential. It's up to you. Also, exponential scale doesn't play nicely with a scale value of 0%. So if you really want to make it work for you, try changing your 0% to something tiny like 0.25% or even 1%, and then just trim out the layer in the timeline so that it won't show after that last frame. I promise no one will notice. Anyway, if you do a RAM preview, you'll see that everything is scaling as it should. But don't get cocky yet. If we think ahead a few steps, we've got another problem, and that problem is, what do we do if we need to ease into our last value? As you'll soon find out through your own experimentation, doing an exponential scale for longer periods, even as little as 5 seconds, results in a sudden change of speed on the last frame, meaning that one moment it's scaling and the next it's not. You know, the way things normally look when you animate unless you ease into the value. And if you try making that last frame an easy ease keyframe, you'll find it doesn't do anything. So what do? Well, I'll save that tip for our next tutorial. Don't forget, you can get the files for this and other podcasts at www.creativecow.net/AE podcast. Once again, this is Aaron Rabinowitz for creativecow.net.